Thank you, sir. Shilpa has said that she will take questions and see how it works during the, how should we put it, during the discussion. The way this panel was sort of configured was to bring out separate, completely divergent sets of issues to to inform the group, which is now considerably smaller than expected, as to what were the kind of issues that people were working on in specific and crucial positions. But it's important in some ways to also bring this panel together on slightly more general questions, and questions which I think many people, both from the seminar and the students here, would be looking or seeking in some ways some kind of views on. And the most important one, I think, is about when we speak about issues of sustainability, whether it's about income or whether it's about growth or whether it's about watersheds or whatever else it is. The main thing that comes up over here is, what are we trying to sustain? How do we play this trade-off between growth, between pollution, between development, between the ecology, between social equity? How are we thinking about balancing this out? And because each time we decide to focus on one thing, what we are doing is we are negating serious questions that are emerging from another space. So for instance, providing urban amenities in rural areas. Now, a basic environmental assessment of a program like this would not be part of the program itself, which is, whereas it's an extreme need to have rural amenities within, to have urban amenities within rural areas. So the question that I would like to pose to the panel in some ways is, how do we begin to balance these ideas? To keep it very simple, how do we begin to balance these ideas of growth and development on one side and the ecology and social equity on the other? So can we start according with the sequence that we went? You can sit, so you don't have to keep getting up. I just bring a mic around. The mic seems to have disappeared, but I think we can hear each other. So,
to address these issues related to environment and social development as part of the economic development projects, we have an environmental and social impact assessment prescribed for the projects, which would mean that what are the inequities which will pop up because of the project, and how are we going to address them, and what are the livelihood opportunities which will be lost or will be gained. What is the impact on the local flora, fauna, environment? What is going to happen to the people? So social impact assessment, environmental and social impact assessment first gets into that, and then there is an environmental and social impact management plan, which becomes integral to the project itself, which would definitely address these issues. But the seriousness with which it is done, or it is meant to be done, gets diluted from the time the project, the plan is made, to the time when it is actually implemented, and finally it remains on paper, or it remains for ritualistic purpose. So that is where, if it is taken up seriously, and if there is a institutional mechanism to verify and see if the environment management plan and the social management plan are implemented in their spirit, then probably these issues can be addressed.
Because yesterday we had somebody called Sagar Dara, who is a considerably well-known environmentalist on here, in Hyderabad and locally as well. He was saying that the ecology, the environment, the energy costs that we are beginning to put out currently are completely actually unsustainable. But the way in which we are continuing our understandings of monetization, of monitoring, of regulation, or whatever else, is based on an understanding that the base level, or our current position itself, is something that can be regulated and understood, or regulated and managed, as opposed to something that is actually inherently in some ways unsustainable. And so, since you are currently the MD of the Industrial Infrastructure Corporation, do you find this this gap in some ways between what you are expected to do effectively do your job, and what you are expected to ignore in some ways in order to effectively do your job? If you understand what I'm saying,
See, if you look at the entire spectrum of resources, it can be safely concluded that there is irresponsibility in the usage of various resources. It could be energy, it could be water, it could be various other like fuel, etc. We have seen lots of unsustainable practices. For instance, many of these watershed projects are located in drought-prone areas where we surprisingly see crops like sugar cane being cultivated. And sugar factories, for example, I was the collector of Kadapa district. It is a extreme drought-prone, rain deficit district, but there is a sugar cane factory, and there are so many other instances also. And I also try to link up that resource deficiency impacts the poor more than the rich, and therefore it is imperative for the reasons of equity, also for the reasons of growth, as he has pointed out, that optimum utilization, balanced utilization is done in a more disciplined way. Now, if you leave everything to government that they will do it equitably or they will do it fairly, etc., it is an assumption which may or may not happen. It's a risky assumption. If you leave it, sometimes it may happen, sometimes it may not happen. But we know that it is going to provide a very strong impact on the livelihoods, and therefore, why leave it to chance? Why create an element of this? Why not try this approach, which is the bottoms-up approach of mobilizing the community and making them aware about their future, their livelihood security, with the issues of resources, how the resources need to be managed sustainably. So I believe that the solutions are not in designing large programs and trying to implement large programs, but through this grassroots mobilization, where we tell the poor to see resources which surround us, which impact on their livelihoods, and the way they are being handled now, how the rest of the community, the rich community, etc., handle it, how it impacts adversely on them, and how they should mobilize, how they should place their own demands, put their own interests above it. So this is my thought, that resources, it could be environmental resources, forest resources, natural resources, etc. Everything on which poor have a greater stake should be viewed from a top-down or from a bottom-up perspective, not from a top-down perspective.
As somebody who's working as a with a trade union, where growth is something that is crucial in some ways. It's no longer feasible to say that we will keep people in the positions in which they are, whether they are tribal or not, or whatever. How does this balance out with a national understanding, let's say, of growth, of a national desire of historically poor people? It's not like even the middle class is recently middle class in India. It's not historical middle class. Their desire for growth, which is inherently unsustainable. It's not possible to have that. It's possible to do that in America and in Europe because of 400, 500 years of colonialism, but it's not possible to do it anywhere else. So how do we balance these two ideas up? Because the desire for growth in some ways is not something that you can say, okay, it's going to stop at the end of a tribal village. It's not that. How would you think about something like that? Not answer it, but just if you
I think there are various aspects to this. If you look at the social spending in the last 10-15 years, you find at the national level, it has actually gone up by 7-8 times or even 10 times. If you look at the amount of money that's allocated for NRHA or the PDS now, I think the latest bill, after the bill, we have got 110 lakh crores, I think, is the outlay for the estimate for the PDS system to run. Now, that is increasing. In fact, I would put resources also, those resources also, how to use those resources also in a way that will actually go benefit those people. I think that is one. If you see in the last, this liberalization and globalization process, we are talking about, I think the other day one economist was talking about, today we are talking about 5-speed India. Like that you have 5 different classes of people who are going at different speeds, like the richest, they are going at one speed, and then there are these professionals and people who are really getting the best of the globalized world, they are going at another speed. Then you have the other speeds, like so the top speed people are always looking at these fellows as the party spoiler. They are having a good time, but why these fellows are actually spoiling our party, and they become a baggage to us. Now, the whole point is that unless these resources that we have are rationally distributed, if the distribution issue is not taken care of properly, and as Ranjan has been pointing it out again and again, if people are not involved and if we don't put faith in people, in their own knowledge systems, I think it's actually going to go, I think even the growth story is not a rosy story. If you see, I think the post-war countries in Europe, what actually happened to their own growth, I think they have come one full circle and their entire social security systems have been dismantled, and today they are all in a bad shape. I think Northern Europe particularly is in a really bad shape, though the Southern Europe is also in much more serious. So the point is, I think this growth story somewhere, I think in India we have the capacity, and we have been showing it time and again, that it is possible to have an alternative mode of doing growth. So I think the challenge really lies there. I think that is where the whole issue of natural resource management lies, the whole question of social equity lies. I think somewhere that idiom has that answers, rather than this kind of a racy growth alone story. I think it's definitely not sustainable. But growth is definitely necessary. I think a person in the village, a tribal village, wants to come to the city and actually be a part of the enlightenment kit.
No, that's the question I'm asking, is that how do we balance this aspiration that India has in some ways, which is a natural aspiration. It's not a greedy aspiration or a selfish in that sense, to put it in very crude terms. But how do we balance this with the concern that we possess? Like the project is trying to replicate the city in smaller places, to spread a model that we know is inherently problematic. But it's a model that is desirous. It's not, they're not forcing this on the small town. The small town wants this in some ways or other. So how do we, I would pose this to you as well, how do we think about this kind of
my own reaction to that question is, I think it's a serious problem, because I think village level, there are their own issues, and I think those issues have to be taken at the face value and resolved at that level. Solid waste management, villages have their own knowledge systems, have to how to deal with them. I don't think we should import our systems there, urban systems there. Maybe it's not necessary. I think bigger cities require different kinds of things, and then the villages require different kinds of things. I think unless that comes from the people, I think the need is need-based. There's no point in transporting. You can provide a bank to them, but you don't have to transport all the urban systems to the villages because of providing the same privilege to them.
So what would be in some ways the bag of goods that you would be providing?
Our intention is that we just want to involve basic idea of this whole idea, involving the community, people and all. Right from the beginning, when we have applied for the project and all those things, we have conducted Gram Sabhas and also. We have taken the inputs only from the village people only, and they passed the resolution. Along with the application also, we have submitted the resolutions passed by various Gram Sabhas along with the application. And the central government also, they have appreciated our idea. Actually, I am telling you, see, the core idea, they want to develop the contiguous villages, just like you see, Ibrahimapatnam and Kondapalli, they are very near to Vijayawada itself. Originally, their idea is only. But as far as our project is concerned, this Parvatagiri is located 60 kilometers away from Parvatagiri. But even then also, our project is being created by our people and the people in the villages and all that. They want, actually, in fact, they only suggested all this. It is not our idea and all this. They want to come. As rightly said by you all, as far as solid waste management is concerned also, what we want to do is, we want to collect the solid waste only from the households and all, by arranging the tricycles and all. What we will do is, we will dump it in, we have identified certain area, where from we will segregate biodigestible and other waste material and all other things. We want to start this very compost, this one and all other things. In that way, we don't want to dump all this, or we don't want to put forth the ideas of this urban and rural people. The ideas they have come only from those people. So in that way, actually, I feel that these programs will be successful. I am having one success story that actually I am telling regarding watershed development and all this. In Hyderabad district actually, when one area they want to implement this watershed and all this. Initially, just for an test check and all this, what they want to do is, they have wanted the various things and all this. They said and all this, we will do one thing on a small scale basis only, and let us apply our base and so. What they have done is a small scale. Nobody has come forward except one farmer who is having a land holding of 3 acres. He is cultivating this cotton only. He is getting a very good yield and all, but he is not getting any support. So sometimes the yield also is very less. But after the construction of this pit and all, the cost of the pit is 62,000 and all. The area has put from 56,000 and the individual farmer we have put 6,000 and all. After constructing this pit and all, what exactly is happened is, the yield of the cotton crop it has been increased, and he has used this pit as a fish pond and all others also. He has supplemented his income. By seeing this, all other farmers they have approached this PAA. We also want to start the same and all. This is the success story which was published in this Mahila Sarvika is a recent and all. So that means there is so much of awareness among the rural people also that what they want to achieve, what they want to get also, they know, and they are also demanding the government and the other agencies. So this idea also gives us one.
I think one of the things that sort of went by in the last discussion was this whole idea about what is the social spread in India. When we speak about urban desire, it's very clear. It's one group in the first street or whatever it is. And when we speak about tribal India, in some ways, it's also very clear because it's homogeneous or a unique or single kind of a social strata. But in this curious middle section, which is a huge section actually, which includes Dalits, it includes other backward castes, it includes the middle castes, it includes the middle classes, and so on. When we speak about motivation, when we speak about, like Dr. Rajan was speaking about mobilization, we are mobilizing people in units, in some ways, along established historical positions. And this mobilization, I don't know how it's working out in the Pura project itself, but this mobilization itself isn't sustainable. If you're thinking about, if you're putting forth a government project, if you're putting and you're saying that this has to happen at the grassroots level or whatever else, what we're doing is we are empowering a community, right? By creating this community. If you're understanding what I'm saying. And if we are saying that there has to be a certain kind of a joint understanding or a joint working together that is required in order for any kind of sustainable motion to happen. And I'm coming back to sustainability again and again because this is a sort of the theme in which we're trying to hold it together. Because of course there are many other positions or views you can take. So how would we then approach something like this? Because these categories that we're creating, whether they are of the Dalit or whether they are of the middle class, caste or whatever else, are categories that have largely been created by the government itself, have been by their schemes, by various kinds of benefits and so on and so forth. So are they, I'm just hoping that people will have some positions to flag on. So for instance, in this, when we speak about equitable distribution, how are we thinking about who is the population in some ways? That is, are we thinking of them as a homogeneous population, or are we thinking of them as populations that have already been defined in a census or defined in a by the British government sometimes? You know, and how do we think about sustainability in these lands?
Sir, I will give you a example. I am an ex-banker. I am a retired assistant general manager from Singapore. My experience is here. I have actually set by Indian firm. Particularly in the IWHG, the involvement of the user process, village organizations. My experience also when I worked as a manager of global brand, when I have financed to several crores, the recovery capability is more than 90%. This is the awareness. Initially, what we used to do is, while forming the group itself, only we used to talk about the homogeneity and governance. When the central groups and they are being formed and all, we used to form a group, which is having a homogeneity. Suppose if they are having a homogeneous nature and all, particularly they used to conduct a regular meeting. They used to maintain this. What are all the deliberations that were going on? So they used to conduct in a systematic manner, and I used to attend also as a branch manager. I used to attend one meeting. I was really surprised, even though they are uneducated and all of they are conducting the meeting in such a manner. Even the educated people, they are not advancing. That is. So my perception of this one is that when there is a woman empowerment involved, when there is a homogeneity, when certain groups are involved, when village organizations are involved, when user groups are involved, that means when the entire community is involved in that particular, naturally there will be a success in that project. And everybody they want to have something. Like that way any project, if we involve, even when I am mentioning as a regional manager, I used to involve all my business, including my driver, attendant and all. I used to take some ideas which sometimes I may not be able to think and all other sorts of things. So yeah, I always believe in a cooperative, in a collective, I always believe in it. Maybe initially we may have difficult and all others. Initial water was a very important thing. Ultimately, we involve, we are sincere, and if we guide the people and all, and if we choose the right people and all.
I think true that these are the government categories, but beyond government categories, I think we are a very extremely unequal society, a caste society, and there are extremely powerful castes and powerful groups, economically, culturally, and all that, and then we are extremely poor. So, in a situation like that, what we find when we analyze the way government welfare money goes, there seems to be some kind of a very perverted logic by which anything that is meant for the poor has a way of losing its value by the time it reaches the. For example, you take basic rice or wheat that is sent, the whole logic of stocking up, and then from somewhere after it is stocked up, it is transported, it is stored in the godown, and finally when it goes to the end user, the quality is very poor. If I think 10% or even 20% of the actually goes waste. So I think that comes from this the very psychology of our society. Forget about government categories, but our own caste system, the way upper caste would treat tribals. I mean, tribals are as good or as bad as Dalits for them. So I think government only can do one part of the story, but I think it's only the movements, it's the political movements, it's the social movements that actually can put a counter to this kind of a process of that big fish eats small fish, law of the fishes. I think that is where the whole challenge lies.
See, I agree that there is tremendous social fragmentation, and we should just have two categories. One is the poor and one is the non-poor. Of course, it is a coincidence that many people from the Dalit, Baujan and tribal community will fall in the poor category. And on many occasions, because they are Dalit, Baujan, tribal, they are doing. So that is the fact. But I also want to add one point that there is a larger role of the government beyond these classifications and categorizations. See, someone has to invest in this mobilization. Mobilization process will not happen in a vacuum. Someone has to realize that it is important to mobilize the poor, and then only all the natural resources and sustainable development can happen. So that investment is not insignificant. In fact, in this Lego project was, which I chose as an exemplar, some crores of rupees. In fact, to tell you the exact picture, in the last 13 years, 2,500 crores has been spent on it. It's not a small amount, 2,500 crores. But if you look at what it has gained by spending 2,500 crores, 25,000 crores is now in the hands of the poorest. People who could not afford even 250 rupees are today kind of playing around with 2,500 crores. But that has happened only because someone agreed that let us invest 250 crores for that. That is the vital role of the government, and that I would say would answer many of these questions.
They did not have such mobilization, then you would not get immediate homeostasis or the level of level playing ground that we are looking for. Whether it is by the government at the central or local or state level, or by the NGOs or activists driven by a special cause or driven by multilateral or bilateral funding, that would be required. And whenever it is not there, then the social movement will pick up and will get into the space which is vacant. And at that time, again the multilateral, bilateral agencies and the state or central government pitching, so that the social movements will vacate the place and they take in the space created by them. Whether it is Naxal movement or post-Naxal reconstruction or pre-Naxal position of a space. Agenda is set sometimes by very proactive people in the government, and if they do not set the agenda, then people will set the agenda, and that could be something sometimes by locals or maybe by the political mobilizers.
One quick last question and then we this whole question of policy paralysis, in the many of the discussions yesterday as well, there was this sense that we know what needs to be done. We know what the way in which we have to deal with waste. We know the way in which we have to deal with energy efficiently. We know what are the kinds of rules we require for urban transportation. We understand cooperatives. We understand watersheds scientifically today, and so on and so forth. We know much of this. But again, just want to bring it back to the older question. This is what I'm trying to constantly come back to. Is that in India today we face a curious paradox. And this paradox is the paradox between development, social equity, and historical injustice. And it is in this resolution of this paradox that I think India is stuck in some. To just sort of make it slightly more clearer, is that everybody is saying, like even Sir was saying, that the entire Pune project is based on grassroots level desires, what people want. What you were also saying was that it has to be grassroots level mobilization, what people want. And this is what has been repeatedly being said. But the problem is that grassroots level mobilizations will naturally occur along historical fault lines. That is, if the government is not going to put out, unless the government is saying something or like you say, investing 250 crores in a particular project, in order to force the government to invest this money, political pressure has to be created. Now this political pressure is created along these existing fault lines. And these fault lines then create huge developmental questions. Because if we are saying that a community requires development, then we cannot tell this community to then be sustainable. It becomes very complicated to do this. So what we are finding is that we are finding on one side people putting pressure for certain kinds of community development. And please don't mistake the fact that I don't see or understand the desperate need for this development of the poorest of the poor, of the Dalits or the Bahujans or whatever it is. But what happens is that because of certain kinds of economic weight, people who you are calling in the first gear of Indian speed have policy working efficiently for them. And people who are historically able to generate certain kinds of pressure understandings because of community weights have certain kinds of policies working for them. But what we have in the middle farmers, for instance, right, who are in this very curious position of being neither here nor there in some way, not being a vote bank, but being spread over the whole country, and the country itself, or the future. So for instance, in the whole of this, the future of India is not a stakeholder. And the future of India is a major player in India, actually, today, sustainably, environmentally, or even ecologically, or whatever else. So this is this is what I'm coming back to time and again, sort of get some understanding of this. So to put it very briefly, if you were to say, where would the future play as a stakeholder in a developing country with pressing immediate issues, how would you think about it? What role would the future? By the future, I mean about generation ecology. Shall we go for it?
Again, coming back to this mobile circle. In 2003, the government gave us and they want to implement it on a pilot basis in 7 districts. In 11th 5-year plan, what they have done is they have suggested projects in others. By seeing the involvement, by seeing the involvement of various aspects of the society in this particular project and others also, as per the information gathered by us in the 12th 5-year plan, they want to implement this in 450 places, 450 constituencies or something like that. That means, suppose if any project is started in all of us, naturally awareness will develop and all that. In all segments of the society and all. As you said, people are concentrating on small and medium, marginal farmer, below 2,000 acres and all. Or they are concentrating on big farmers. Nobody is concentrating on the farmers. But because of this awareness that is being created in the 12th plan, they want to implement it. That means all the way naturally automatically there will be awareness among various sections of the society. Because of the awareness, see, after independence of there were lots of there.
I think the questions that you have raised, I think there are larger philosophical aspects to them, moral aspects to them, and also very practical aspects to development as such. But now today we are part of this kind of a large global village, and we are all trying to find our own spaces, and that becomes the biggest rationale for the government moving in its own direction, economists taking the economy in particular direction. So even as that goes, so today we are no longer talking about options. We are only talking about how to cope with where we are all going. So the destination seems to be already a foregone conclusion. It's only the means that we deploy. How we do it is the question remaining about. So there, I think the poor are the ones which are really suffering. Now, on a moral level, I think as long as we treat the poor as apprentice citizens and expecting them to provide awareness to them, and then they become citizens like us, I think as long as that happens, I think there is a serious problem about even mobilization also. We are doing mobilization at a grassroots level. We are facing this problem constantly. That the whole point is just to treat them as citizens and then to treat them that they are entitled to something and they are entitled. Now that is one question. But then I think the more important point I think Dr. Ranjan has really pointed out is that investment into the mobilization, to consider that mobilization is important. Mobilization in the sense to respect people, to have faith in them is the most important thing. when we made a small instance that we were about to make a presentation to the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh. So the Principal Secretary, before he was kind of going through our presentation, I think the one point he made that, there's one point I'll make that this idea of giving unconditionally is putting faith in people. Because you are not prejudiced that they will misuse the money. Whereas I think government scheme by its nature, because of that lack of mobilization, it already presupposes that they are going to misuse. And then all the rules are made so as that should not be misused. So I think in the question of addressing the issues of the poor, unless that issue is tackled, I don't think we will fail.
See, if you look at the large economic debate which has happened in the country in the last 10 years, debate has basically focused on how much should we invest in infrastructure creation, which could have a multiplier effect on growth, etc., versus how much should we spend on the welfare of the disadvantaged. The people who have advocated the first model, largely the Prime Minister's Office, the Planning Commission, the Finance Ministry, their argument is that most of their benchmarks are linked to China. They see the Chinese model as the best model, which India should emulate. And they feel that if rapid economic growth is possible, then only surpluses will be available, and then we can take care of the disadvantage and the others. And to create that rapid economic growth, substantial investment in infrastructure is, so that is one vision of how the future can be. The second vision is that, let us say, the National Advisory Committee, NSE, various other ministries of the country, is to invest in people. So you have had important programs like this Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, and now the food security. Of course, these have also been diluted and modified, etc. If you look at their original intention, the scope and the ambition of these schemes, these programs were quite high. And the promise was of bringing huge amounts, huge resources, right, for the benefit of the poor. But if you look at these 10 years, there is no clear direction that okay, it has to be this or it has to be that. Some kind of middle ground was attempted, what our Prime Minister and others call as inclusive. I think made some focus there, but at the same time you continue with programs like NREGA, etc. But then because the priorities of infrastructure and growth, etc., those imperatives are also high, we are only getting a diluted version of NREGA or the food security and so on and so forth. And other instruments of empowering the people like RTI and for instance right to education, etc. Many of them are creating rights artificially. For example, right to education creates certain rights on paper, but the wherewithal to deliver those rights, to balance those rights with responsibilities, and the mechanism by which those rights can be made justiciable. If I am not able to uphold my right, what option do I have to kind of express my grievance, etc. So as of now, if you look at the last 10 years of economic models, there is no absolute clarity on where the future will be. My personal experiences, and as you have pointed out, the model shows that it is possible to achieve both. Like his example, this case study explained, that it is not just a welfare model, it can also stimulate growth. Similarly, investing in the poor can also stimulate. There are lots of theories, for instance, the bottom of the pyramid theory, etc., which actually establishes with data, with evidence, that investing in the poor can also have an equally strong multiplier as investing in infrastructure. So all these examples, all these micro level initiatives, success stories are there, and we just need to see how it will play out in the form of policies in the coming 10 years or 20 years.
I think that example, first presentation he made, where he gave the example of Amul, I think that's a kind of a blend of both cooperative model and corporate model. So, how much corporate is eating into cooperatives and how much corporates are eating into corporate, we don't know. But I think that's the kind of a blend we are talking about.
I think when we've been forcing our investment in the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, without equal stress on the manpower to manage it, we come to a level where to maintain the physical infrastructure we require a manpower, and hence we are looking at people's models. Whenever we have created aspirations in people by way of mobilization or by way of education, if we are not able to really place them provide them a space where they could work on, we would have social movements or movements for statehood or movements for accommodation or movements for seeing their aspirations being met. That is what eventually we force create the space, and probably the state and the players to lead.
Thank you. I won't keep you any longer than this. Thank you so much for your patience and your time, and of course your contribution to this discussion. Before we finish, I would just like to quickly give out a small mementos. Sir, Mr. Kamesh Rao, thank you so much for coming. Sir, thank you so much. Sir, just one more. Yeah, it's just one of these things that is part of the habit, which is not a particularly sustainable practice. Thank you for coming, sir. Yes, you can put your own photograph up there. Thank you so much. Please join us for lunch if you have time. And yeah, it's already ready. It's just